The royal chamber was built to impress the universe. Its ceiling curved like a silent sky, filled with soft, floating lights that copied distant stars. The walls were carved from living crystal that changed color with emotion, but now they stayed dull and pale. The air itself felt heavy, as if it knew that something precious was slipping away. At the center of the chamber lay the alien princess. She rested on a raised platform shaped like open wings, her slender form surrounded by quiet machines and glowing symbols. Her skin, once known for its gentle shine, looked faded and cold. Thin lines of light moved slowly across her body, showing that her life was still there, but barely. Each breath was slower than the last. The royal family stood close, yet powerless. The emperor, tall and proud, kept his hands locked behind his back. His face showed control, but his eyes betrayed fear. Beside him, the empress whispered old prayers in a language forgotten by most of the galaxy. Advisors, healers, and scholars filled the chamber, but none dared speak loudly. They had already tried everything. For weeks, the best minds of the empire had worked without rest. Advanced science, ancient rituals, mental healing, and energy transfer all had failed. The princess's condition had no clear cause. Her body was shutting down as if it had simply decided that life was no longer worth holding on to. And now, only one final formality remained. At the far edge of the chamber stood a human. He looked small compared to the others. His name was Daniel Carter, an envoy from Earth sent to observe and learn. Humans were still new to this part of the galaxy. They were considered creative and curious, but physically weak and biologically simple. Allowing a human into the royal chamber was not tradition, it was diplomacy. Daniel stood stiffly, hands at his sides, trying not to stare. He felt out of place among the tall alien nobles with glowing eyes and elegant movements. The air felt thicker here, harder to breathe. He had been warned not to move, not to speak, and not to approach the princess under any condition. He had no intention of doing so. Daniel had seen injured people before, accidents, disasters, even battlefields back on Earth, but this was different. The silence, the waiting, the shared fear, it pressed against his chest. He felt like he was standing in a room where hope was slowly being turned off. The chief healer stepped forward, her long fingers trembling slightly as she adjusted a floating symbol. The symbol dimmed. "She is fading," the healer said quietly. "There is nothing more we can attempt." He felt a strange pull in his chest, a deep unease that had nothing to do with fear. Suddenly, the floor vibrated. It was small, barely noticeable, caused by distant machinery adjusting power levels across the palace. But Daniel, already tense, lost his balance. His foot slipped slightly on the smooth, crystal floor. He stumbled forward. Gasps filled the chamber. Before any guard could react, Daniel's hand brushed against the princess's fingers. It was not intentional. It lasted less than a second, but the room froze. Guards rushed forward, weapons half raised. Nobles shouted in alarm. The emperor's eyes snapped open, burning with shock and anger. Touching a royal without permission was unthinkable. Touching the dying princess was unforgivable. Daniel pulled his hand back instantly, heart racing. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice shaking. "I didn't mean to." The chief healer stared at her instruments. That is not possible," she whispered. The princess took a deeper breath. It was not a miracle surge or dramatic movement. It was small but clear. Her chest rose more than before. Color slowly returned to her skin, faint but undeniable. Silence crashed down harder than any sound. The guards stopped mid-step. The emperor's anger faded into disbelief. The empress moved forward, hands shaking, eyes wide with hope she did not dare trust. Daniel stood frozen, staring at his own hand like it no longer belonged to him. "I didn't do anything," he said softly, more to himself than anyone else. The machines continued to respond. Energy readings stabilized. Systems that had been failing moments ago now showed balance. The princess's heart rhythm, once uneven and weak, began to steady. The chief healer fell to one knee, overwhelmed. "The decay has slowed," she said. "No, it has stopped." "I don't understand this. Humans can't, we don't have powers like that." "The human's contact triggered a response," she said. "Not technological, not psychic, biological." And yet the proof lay breathing before them. The princess shifted slightly, her fingers curling just a little. Her face relaxed as if pain was slowly letting go. The empress let out a sob of relief and rushed to her side. The emperor raised a hand, stopping the guards from advancing further. "Do not touch him," he commanded quietly. Daniel felt his knees weaken. He was not arrested. He was not attacked. That somehow felt worse. "I can leave," Daniel offered, "if my presence is a problem." "Just human," he said. We don't like giving up on people." And no one in the royal court could explain why it wore a human face. Far across the palace, alarms quietly shut down, no longer needed. The Empire did not know it yet, but everything had just changed. The chamber did not return to normal after that moment. Even though the machines hummed in steady balance and the princess continued to breathe, the air stayed tense like the galaxy itself was holding its breath. No one moved without thinking. No one spoke unless necessary. Daniel was escorted to a quiet room near the royal wing. It was not a prison, but it was not freedom either. Two guards stood outside the door, tall and silent, their eyes always watching. Inside, the room was clean and bright, with a single chair and a smooth table made of the same living crystal as the palace walls. Daniel sat with his hands resting on his knees, still staring at them as if answers might appear on his skin. He replayed the moment again and again in his mind. The slip, the touch. The shock, he felt no energy, no heat, no strange power, just skin touching skin. That was all. Yet somehow the impossible had happened. Across the palace, the royal chamber was alive with quiet urgency. Healers moved carefully around the princess, checking every reading, every signal. Scholars arrived with floating data screens, whispering to one another in fast, nervous tones. The emperor and empress never left their daughter's side. The princess was no longer dying. She was not fully healed, but she was no longer fading. Her body was holding on as if something had reminded it how. The chief healer watched the readings closely, her mind racing. "The stabilization continues," she said, "but it is not self-sustaining." "What do you mean?" he asked. She hesitated, choosing her words with care. "The effect is strongest when the human is nearby," she said. "The further he is, the weaker the response becomes." "But with caution." Servants stepped aside. Whispers followed him like shadows. The human had become something new overnight. When Daniel entered the royal chamber again, he immediately felt it. The heavy pressure in his chest returned, but now it was mixed with something else. Warmth, familiarity, almost like relief. The princess stirred slightly as he stepped closer. The empress noticed first. "She reacts to him," she said softly. Daniel stopped several steps away from the platform, unsure where he was allowed to stand. "I don't want to cause problems," he said. "I really don't know how this works." "That's kind of how humans are sometimes." A ripple of disbelief spread through the chamber. The healer's hands shook slightly as she adjusted her instruments. "This is not energy transfer," she murmured. "It is resonance." "That sounds bad." "Have you ever experienced anything like this before?" he asked. Daniel thought for a moment. "No," he said. "But humans do strange things under stress. Adrenaline, shock, survival responses. We don't always know why we can do what we do." "When humans see someone hurt," he said, "especially someone who can't help themselves, something switches on. We push past pain, past limits. We lift things we shouldn't be able to lift. We keep going when logic says we should stop." Her eyes fluttered beneath closed lids. A soft sound escaped her throat, not words, but awareness. The empress leaned forward, tears forming. "She hears us," she whispered. Hours passed. Daniel remained near the platform, allowed to sit on a small chair beside it. He was offered food and water, though he barely touched them. Every time he shifted or grew tired, the healer gently reminded him to stay close. Each time he did, the princess improved just a little more. As the artificial night cycle dimmed the lights, the princess finally opened her eyes. They were large and luminous, filled with confusion and life. The empress gasped softly, pressing a hand to her mouth. "My child," she whispered. The princess turned her head slowly, taking in the room. Her gaze moved from her parents to the healers, then stopped on Daniel. Their eyes met. Something passed between them, not words, not emotion exactly, recognition. "You are loud," the princess said weakly, speaking in her own language. Daniel blinked. "I'm sorry," he said. The healer translated quickly. "She perceives your presence strongly," she explained. "Stronger than anyone else." The scholars exchanged uneasy glances. This was no longer a medical mystery alone. It was becoming political. By the next cycle, word had spread beyond the palace. The Galactic Council demanded answers. Reports flooded in, questioning human classification, safety, and potential risk. A human whose presence alone could alter royal biology was no small concern. The emperor stood before a private council, his expression firm. "The human will not be harmed," he said. "He saved my daughter." Back in the chamber, Daniel sat quietly beside the princess. She was still weak but stable. Every breath she took felt like proof that hope was real. "I don't understand you," she said softly. Daniel smiled tiredly. That makes two of us, he replied. Outside the palace, across distant stars, something had begun to shift. Humanity had not arrived as conquerors or geniuses. They had arrived as something far more unsettling, unintentional saviors. The days that followed were filled with quiet tension and careful watching. The palace no longer felt like a place of ceremony. It felt like a place of study. Every movement, every breath, every small change was noticed and recorded. Daniel remained close to the princess. At first, he was allowed near her only for short periods. The healers feared pushing the strange effect too far, but each time he was asked to step away, the readings dipped. Her breathing became shallow again. Her color faded slightly. Nothing dangerous, but enough to worry everyone in the room. So Daniel stayed. A simple chair was placed beside the platform. Sometimes he sat. Sometimes he stood. Sometimes he just rested his hand on the edge of the platform, careful not to touch her unless told. He felt awkward and helpless, like a visitor who had overstayed his welcome but was afraid to leave. The princess grew stronger with each cycle. She could sit up now, supported by soft energy fields. She could speak longer without growing tired. Her eyes were clear, sharp with intelligence and curiosity, and always they followed Daniel, the scholars noticed. She tracks him even when her eyes are closed, one of them said quietly. The chief healer nodded. It is not sight, she replied. It is awareness. If something goes wrong, humans just learn to move anyway. When the human entered, she continued, his body did not accept that conclusion. There was no debate, no permission, only refusal. Non-invasive scans showed Daniel's biology responding subtly whenever the princess weakened. His heart rate changed. His breathing adjusted. Hormone levels shifted, not wildly, but with purpose. It was as if his body was unconsciously reacting to hers, trying to stabilize something it believed should not be failing. This is not control, the healer said during one discussion. This is instinct. Yet they burned. The princess's heart rhythm became uneven. Her breathing lost depth. Her eyes fluttered open, confused. He is gone, she said. The healer nodded. Yes, she replied, only for a moment. The room seemed warmer, though no temperature had changed. The test was undeniable. The human was no longer a coincidence. News of this reached the Galactic Council in full detail. Emergency sessions were called. Species representatives filled vast halls of light and shadow. Human data, once archived and ignored, was pulled forward and studied with new urgency. They are unstable, one representative argued, unpredictable. That distinction did not comfort him. I didn't ask for this, he said to the princess one night. No, she replied, but neither did I ask to be born royal. I tripped, Daniel replied. That's hardly heroic. That, she said at last, may be why you are dangerous. Yet concern darkened the emperor's thoughts. If the council decides he is a threat, he said quietly to the empress, they will act. They asked Daniel to speak. He stood before them, feeling very human and very small. I don't have answers, he said honestly. I don't even understand what's happening. I didn't choose this. In that moment, it became clear to everyone present that humanity's place in the galaxy had shifted. Not through conquest, not through brilliance, but through refusal to walk away, refusal to accept loss as final, refusal to stop caring even when caring changed everything. And somewhere deep inside Daniel, a quiet realization settled. Whatever he was now, he could never go back to being unimportant. The palace changed its rhythm after that declaration. The halls were still bright, still calm on the surface, but beneath it all, something moved like a slow tide. Decisions were being made far beyond the walls, and everyone could feel it. Daniel felt it most of all. He was no longer just an observer or a guest. He had become a point around which the future turned. That knowledge sat heavy on his shoulders. He spent long hours beside the princess, sometimes speaking, sometimes sitting in silence. The healers allowed more freedom now. She could walk short distances, supported by gentle fields of light. Each step she took felt like a victory shared by the entire empire. And always Daniel was near. Not touching, not directing, just present. The scholars continued their work, but their questions changed. They no longer asked if Daniel was responsible. They asked how humanity had become this way. Human history was brought into the palace archives. Wars, disasters, collapses, recoveries, the rise and fall of nations. The constant pattern of loss followed by rebuilding. The data was vast and uncomfortable. These creatures live in permanent crisis, one scholar said, staring at a long stream of human records. Their entire evolution is shaped by instability. Prevention of suffering at all costs. When she grew tired, his alertness increased. When she felt calm, his systems relaxed. It was not control, it was response. He is not healing her, the healer explained during a council briefing. He is reinforcing her decision to live. And that is what makes this dangerous and remarkable. She looked at him with steady eyes. "You are a mirror," she said. "They see what they fear becoming." "I don't want to hurt anyone," he said. "You will not," the healer assured him. The patient's condition improved slightly, not dramatically, just enough to confirm the pattern. Daniel felt exhausted afterward, like he had run for hours without moving. "It takes something from me," he admitted. The healer nodded. "Not energy," she said. "Focus, emotional engagement." "That tracks," he said. "Humans burn out fast." "Humans evolved without natural harmony," the scholar explained. "Their environments were hostile, their societies unstable. Survival required constant adjustment." "You are saying they are built to resist endings," he said. "Yes," the scholar replied, "even when those endings are not their own." It was as if understanding had removed a final barrier. She trained her body again, slowly, carefully. Daniel often watched from the side, offering encouragement when she grew tired. "You sound like a commander," she teased once. "I'm just good at cheering," he said. She smiled. Beyond the palace, the Galactic Council argued fiercely. Some demanded isolation of humanity. Others called for alliance. A few warned that ignoring humans now would be the greatest mistake of their era. One voice stood out. "They are not conquerors," the voice said. "They are anchors, and anchors change the shape of everything around them." Daniel was nervous as he stood in a controlled chamber surrounded by observers. Another patient lay nearby, monitored carefully. Daniel did nothing special. He sat, he breathed, he paid attention. The readings improved, not dramatically, not instantly, but steadily. The chamber erupted in quiet shock. Daniel closed his eyes, overwhelmed. "I don't want to be a weapon," he said afterward. The Emperor placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then do not be," he said. "Be what you already are." "Meaning is not required," she said. "Presence is." And strangely, that felt right. He had not saved a princess by strength or skill. He had simply stayed when leaving would have been easier. And the universe had noticed. The announcement was made at dawn, when the palace lights slowly shifted from soft blue to warm gold. Across the empire, screens awakened. In distant stations, in orbiting cities, and on worlds tied to the royal line, beings paused to listen. The princess stood beside the emperor and empress. She stood on her own. That alone sent a wave of quiet shock through the empire. Only days ago she had been fading. Now she was upright, steady, her presence strong and calm. The healers stood nearby, no longer anxious, only watchful. Daniel stood a little behind them. He wore the same simple clothes he had arrived in. No symbols, no rank, just human. The emperor spoke first. His voice carried easily, calm and firm. "My people," he said, "we have faced a moment that challenged our understanding of life, strength, and survival. My daughter lives," he continued, "because we learned that endurance can come from unexpected places." He healed her by refusing to accept that her story was finished. The human reminded me that choice exists, even when the body forgets. Some debated, some grew uneasy, but none could deny what had happened. Humanity had been reclassified, not as fragile, not as insignificant, but as high impact through presence alone. Daniel did not attend the celebrations that followed. He felt overwhelmed by the attention, by the quiet stares and careful voices. He spent most of the time in a garden near the palace, sitting beneath tall crystal trees that glowed softly when touched by light. The princess joined him there. She walked easily now. Her steps were confident, her posture relaxed. She sat beside him, close but not touching. "They are calling this a turning point," she said. Daniel sighed. "I tripped," he replied. "That's a strange way to turn history. And I think it's important they hear them from a human who didn't try to be important." "You will always have a place here," the emperor said, "if you choose it. We just didn't leave." Curious, respectful, at the gate the princess stopped him. "Will we meet again?" she asked. Daniel smiled. "I think so," he said. "The galaxy feels smaller now." The princess watched the stars from her balcony, feeling strong, grounded, alive. She knew her life would never return to what it had been, and she was grateful. On Earth, Daniel's return caused waves of confusion and wonder. His reports were simple, clear, honest. He did not claim power, he did not accept praise, he spoke of presence, of staying. of humans being shaped by hardship until refusal became instinct. Some listened, some argued, but slowly something shifted. Human diplomats were welcomed differently. Human crews were requested during crises. Human observers were invited into rooms where hope was thin, not because humans had answers, but because they did not leave when answers failed. Far across the stars, other civilizations took notice. They began to ask quiet questions. What would happen if a human stood with us? What would happen if they stayed? The princess, now fully restored, took her place among the stars as a leader changed by survival. She remembered the human often not as a savior, but as a reminder. Life could argue back. And somewhere on Earth, Daniel Carter lived a simple life again. He walked city streets. He helped strangers. He stayed when things were hard. He never glowed. He never healed with a touch again. But the universe had learned something important. When a human stands beside you, endings become negotiable. And that knowledge spread quietly and endlessly from star to star.